Hi, welcome to Vancouver Bass Players. I'm Lawrence Mallerup, and today I'll be interviewing Catherine Hiltz.
Hello, my name is Catherine Hiltz.
This
Nice
part is
to
my
meet you.
lesson on how to hold the bass. I'll let you go again, Catherine.
Go again?
Yeah, no, I can see it. That's awesome.
That was my fancy bass trick.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when you're touring on stage, you need to have some of those kind of moves that you can do and not drop your Sadowski bass on the ground.
Yeah, I used the Sadowski to show that I was really serious about this
That's
training.
right. That's commitment there. If you're willing to put that up in the air, you must be pretty good at it.
I've done it a few times.
That's a
Another
great
fun thing is
feeling.
that a lot of the machine heads, you have a little bit of a lip. So if you have a ledge or like sometimes in those outdoor festival tents, you have like some wire. So you can hang your bass there and it just looks like it's floating because the audience can't see that it's hanging on something. Uh, but if you do that, you have to credit me. That's
Okay,
my trick.
that's another great move. So Catherine, I'm so happy to see you today. For those Vancouver bass players that might not know yet, Catherine Hiltz is the bass player for Queers Funk and Tegan and Sarah and Ray Spoon. She's worked with producers like Howard Redikoff and Michael V. And Sylvia Massey, and she's played with the Sojourners and Carrie McClellan and a whole bunch of other Vancouver artists. And she's also a student at Vancouver Community College, finishing out her degree. And we're both from Edmonton.
Mm-hmm. So
Oilers.
this is where we're supposed to talk about the Oilers.
I saw Gretzky get signed when I was a young man. I was at that game, and
That's pretty cool.
there weren't a lot of hockey games for me growing up, but that was one that I fortunately got to see, and that was still a good memory.
Yeah, that's a piece of history for sure.
Absolutely. So, speaking of that and memories and those kind of things, do you have a favorite memory around bass playing or a story you'd like to share to start off?
Yeah, so one of my favorite musical memories was with this band called Hot Panda at the time. And they had always kind of like, they'd traveled to Europe and we'd done a couple of European tours, which at that point in my life, I thought it was pretty cool. Because you're like getting out of Canada and you're getting on an airplane with your instrument, it's a really special feeling. But after we had done that a couple times and we made some connections, we played this festival in France called Transmusicale. And it was my first like big show, like my first show where there's like side fill monitors and like I can't see the bass player or the drummer because he's too far away, and like it's just like everything was so brand new, and it was in like an airport hangar, and I think the capacity was like 3,500, and it's like since then I've played things that are bigger than that, but certainly up to that point that was the biggest thing, and it was just like so overwhelming. We played the show and I put in like 150% energy, and right afterwards I just like put my bass down and I was like, I'm gonna throw up. That was the thing where I was just like, I went off stage and I was like, where's the garbage can, because like it was so much. I didn't throw up, which was good, but yeah, that definitely like sticks in my mind as like one of the points where I was like, is this is this a career, is this a job, did I make it, like feeling pretty cool about that.
Yeah, like pinch me. Is this really happening? Am I really doing this for my job? That's pretty amazing. What a great experience. When you came up as a musician, I know your mom was a piano teacher, so that's a very strong early influence. And I know you play a lot of different instruments like piano and guitar and cello. And I assume you probably play some double bass too. I don't know if I've seen you play very much double bass. Well, there's some calluses. Okay, good. Yeah, that's the proof right there.
Yeah.
Got a pair myself. So maybe you'd like to tell us a bit about your upbringing as a player. We both came from Edmonton, so we probably have some connections there musically, although I left a long time before you did, and both moved out to Vancouver. So yeah, why don't you tell us a bit about that?
Sure, yeah. I started playing. My mom is a piano teacher, so she had me in. She enrolled me in the Suzuki program when I was 4 years old. I got to choose which instrument. So they had a violin player and a viola player, I think, and a cellist. And I was like, I want to play the cello because they're sitting down. Which in my mind, I remember as a 4-year-old, that was the conscious decision that I made. So I did, also cello all throughout my youth and youth orchestra, which we both played in. Although I was cello, you were upright or double bass.
Yeah, and probably 40 years between us, but yes.
Yeah, not at the same time, that's for sure. The same conductor though, we've realized, which is amazing, and I think that he's still conducting now, if I'm not mistaken.
Michael Massey, I remember my audition for him. My bow was shaking so much.
Yeah, he can be intimidating, but also very kind.
Oh no, he was a sweetheart all the way down. Yeah, absolutely. Great guy.
So yeah, youth orchestra, all the way up until the end of high school. I did cello, so I did up until I did grade 10 RCM cello. I was mentioning in the other interview that I was playing cello, and I kind of thought that was my thing until I heard the Beatles. And that was grade 6, and then just like I was obsessed. I was just like, this is all I care about. So I had to learn how to play guitar. And of course, you know, my mom was supportive, and she had a guitar, and I started guitar lessons. And you know, in my high school was really quite good. They had lots of different jazz programs. They had 3 different jazz bands, 3 different jazz combos. They had a choir. They had a concert band. So I, of course, played in everything. You know, and like,
What high school was that?
this is Ross Shepherd in Edmonton. So the director at the time was Scott Rogel and Roy Townend.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a really well-funded program, and I feel really lucky to have been part of that, because they did a lot of jazz stuff. So that was kind of my introduction to jazz. I was playing guitar at the time, and so at the end of high school, I was like, well, I can do cello or I can do jazz guitar. So I chose jazz guitar because, you know, I love rock and roll, and I guess that's the next best thing when you're going to a post-secondary institution.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I did performance at Graham McEwen, which is also in Edmonton. That was my diploma, and then I also did another year, so I did 2 diplomas. I did composition as well. All the while, I was kind of, you know, playing in bands, and it wasn't until I finished Graham McEwen that I actually joined the band that was touring quite a bit, and then I just spent, I don't know, 13 years touring, playing in all sorts of different bands, not just one band, but like a few different bands, but the band in particular that was the busiest was Hot Panda. And there was a lot that I was learning, not musically, but just like about being in a band. So like writing grants and booking a tour, and then going on tour, and then being on tour for like 9 months of the year, and then, you know, working with a manager, working with a label, working with, you know, arts organizations and all sorts of stuff that are real world things that you don't learn when you're just practicing or when you're just taking lessons. So.
Oh, that's great. So playing many instruments in many bands.
Mm-hmm.
That's a recipe for success right there.
And exhaustion and insomnia.
Oh, that's great. When you tour, do you have any favorite gear that takes you on the road and in the studio with you? Is there equipment that you just love using?
Yeah, I just got this bass amp, Sonic Farm Tantra.
Oh yeah.
That's a really, really great amp. It's like, having been on tour, you play lots and lots of backline amps. So I feel like it's rare that I see an amp that I haven't played before. So I'm kind of like, you know, when I played this one, and it was just so awesome sounding. It was so rich and so present, and just, you know, this beautiful amp. I was like, this is the amp that I'm gonna have forever, probably. You know, and it's like, you know, I love that. I recently just did a tour. I've never done this before, but I recently, just in November, I did a tour where I only brought the amp, and I didn't bring a cabinet. Everything was in-ears, and that actually worked great. So I had the Sonic Farm, I had the Tantra, and then just in-ears, which was new. Coming from a rock and roll touring background, that was a new thing for me. But it's really, really fun. It sounded really great and really clean.
What do you have your own in-ears that you like above other kinds?
Yeah, I've got these Plunge Audio.
Oh yeah, so that's Simon Fisk.
Simon Fisk in Calgary, yeah, and I want to show you get a little custom. I got this Mario
Oh sweet.
thing on here.
I love
So
it.
these Plunge in-ear monitors.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I know Simon comes out every few months and out to Vancouver and takes impressions of people's ears, and then when they're ready to order, he can do it. So that's a great, you know, Canadian connection and bass player connection as well.
Yeah, it made me feel more comfortable about ordering from him, because I'm like, he's a bass player, he's going to know what I want to hear, you know?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, you know, headphones for bass are so important, because you're taken out of that sort of positional thing with drums where the hi-hat feels over there and the bass drum feels over there, and you have that sort of almost tactile sense of where the sounds are, and your sound, which is usually coming out of the amp and hitting you in the ankles or something.
Yeah.
You know, and the way you put yourself into a mix, given all that. So you kind of need someone with expertise knowing all those problems rather than just giving you, you know, what Sony thinks is a good sound necessarily, or what the general public might want. So yeah, I think that's a great option. And I noticed your Sadowski bass, you have a 5-string. Is it like a jazz bass, like my bass, or like my Fender's it's just like a 70s jazz, right? So that's what I love about it. Is yours a jazz as well?
It's a jazz body, but it has a P. It's the PJ, so it's got a P pickup in the
Okay.
sorry, jazz pickup in the bridge position and a P pickup in the neck.
I think those are Nordstrom pickups, if I remember correctly.
On this,
The angled P bass ones look like Nordstrom to me.
oh, maybe.
Maybe they make them for Sadowski or something like that. But I know when Kerry started making pickups, that was one of the big things he did, was turn the pole pieces at an angle like that.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, I never would have thought, because they're branded Sadowski, but yeah, if somebody else for sure is making them.
Yeah, maybe they have some kind of a deal. I know Kerry makes pickups for lots of people like Ibanez and other people like that.
Awesome.
So is that your main bass? Do you play any other bass when you're recording? Do you have like a set of basses that you like?
Yeah, I've got a 70s P bass. It's a 78. So this one's kind of fun.
Show and tell goes over really well on these. I think. Oh, look at that. There you go.
love this one, but I kind of wish it was a rosewood board rather than maple.
Oh, that's interesting. Do you run flat wounds on that or round wounds?
I do have flat ones on this. Yep.
Yeah, I found I had a PJ myself that I built, and I put chromes on it, and I just felt like I'd finally found the right sound of that. It is a rosewood alder bass. But, you know, rounds on a P bass too they're kind of all great, right?
Yeah, and I didn't really understand, because the setup had a lot to do with it too. So I couldn't just put them on and be like, oh yeah, perfect. So my normal round wound string setup didn't work as well. So I had to kind of raise it a little bit, and then I was like, oh, I understand, I get it. You know.
Yeah, there's that
flat
moment.
wound with.
It's like for me, learning to use a pick fairly late in my career. It's only been about the last 10 years where I thought picks were okay, and now I kind of love the sound of a pick. And then there's that whole set of preferences of learning how to hold it and what thickness of pick and where to strike the string, just like there is with regular finger playing. You know, so that bass actually looks a lot like my 71 jazz that I had, the Sunburst and Maple, and so I'm liking it. That's pretty cool. Yeah, so I think with that mix of those basses and Sonic Farm, you'd be pretty much ready for anything.
Yeah. The only problem is that I play so many other instruments. So if I get a guitar gig, I'm like, oh, I don't have, you know, I put all my money into my bass gear.
Right.
Or now I'm doing like recording production stuff, and I'm like, oh, I don't have any money left over after buying all these basses.
Yeah, there's no shortage of things to buy. That's why Gear Talk is always fun, right? Because, oh, I could get that, or I could get that. And what's that player using? And I love the way they sound. And yeah, it's a never-ending trap, but also fun, right? Yeah. No, that's great. So do you have any, I think maybe for our last sort of topic would be, do you have any advice for the young up-and-coming bass players, maybe someone like you who saw the light and came from cello, or like me, you know, saw the light and came from piano as a kid, you know, things that people should be working on or thinking about, or, you know, ways of encouraging young players?
Sure, yeah. Time. I would just say time. Like, it's fun to play a lot of notes and whatever, and I love doing that too, but like, I just find working on time and like playing good time so satisfying, and also just so, like, it's the only thing. Like, I feel like it's, as a bass player, like, if you can't do that, then like, you know, what else is there? So I find it really meditative too. It's a really nice way of just like locking into something and, you know, clearing your mind and just being like, this is what I'm doing.
Oh, that's such a beautiful way of saying it. That's exactly how I feel it, that when you lock in with a favorite drummer and there's this feeling that you don't have to do anything now, that you feel like they're playing and they feel like you're playing, and sort of no effort, and the groove just takes off. I remember seeing you play with Sal Zori at the college, and the two of you, I mean, they were just laying it down, and you played such a great pocket together, and that's when I really like, I just, you know, I can't say enough about how important that is, and how bass players recognize that thing as well. I'm definitely someone who came up wanting to be very notey, right? I had Scott LaFaro and Jaco Pastorius as my goals, like most bass players who came up in the 70s and 80s. And it took me a long time to realize I love playing a lot simpler than that, and not playing a fill every 8 bars, and maybe not the whole gig. Try to go the whole gig without playing a fill that was showy at all, and that's taken me a while for sure. And it's nice to know people are thinking about those priorities, and that's probably a good deal of your success working with the producers that you work with and the acts you work with, is putting the focus on the right thing. I know earlier we were talking about how, because you can play a lot of instruments, you kind of have this bird's eye view of the band. You know why the guitar player might be doing A or B, and how string sounds would work. And I think maybe, also that you're a producer as well. Is there a way that bass playing ties in with that sort of bird's eye view, and maybe there's a connection there with not playing a fill every couple of bars?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it really, when you understand it's the bass's role. Like if I was only a bass player, I'd want to express my entire musical personality through that instrument, but that's not what it is for me. It's like a guitar, the keys and whatever other instrument I play. It's just like understanding all of those instruments and what they do and how they function, and what you can do to support that is, I think there are a lot of bass player producers for that reason, because you're understanding the support and kind of like the holistic approach of what's happening, rather than just kind of like an instrumental singular focus.
But I'll also say at the same time, as I've heard you play Great Groove, I also know you haven't neglected being able to play a lot of notes when you feel like it.
Yeah.
I remember, was it Joe Pass transcription I heard? I'm trying to remember exactly. Yeah. Where you really, you got all the feeling of that guitar solo and put it on the bass, and there's no question you've got some chops as well. So,
well, shucks.
It's all about knowing how to do stuff at the right time, right? I think maybe that appropriateness for the gig is a big part of it as well.
Oh yeah, and every day I feel like I'm learning more. So now when I go back and listen to those recordings, I'm like, oh, I wish I didn't do that. Oh, I wish I had,
Yeah.
But I can't regret it. I can only just be who I am today.
Well, it's interesting because when I interviewed Warren Long from the VSO, another bass player, and he was talking about that sense of it's never really good enough. You're always going to feel a little discouraged with your playing, and I think when I hear it from someone like that who I admire, and when I hear it from you as well, it sort of takes the edge off, where you can go, okay, yeah, I'm never going to be totally happy with this, but I'll put it out there, and then sometimes you get a positive comments from someone that make you feel even better, like, oh, okay, so-and-so like this, so maybe I'm wrong when I think I suck this badly.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for chatting with me today, Catherine. It's been just great. And like I said, I'll post this on Vancouver Bass Players and on my YouTube later on. And it's just been great to talk to you. And I wish you all the best this summer and in the year coming up.
Thanks, Lawrence. Thanks for having me.
You bet.